Good day, Ma'am Claire. So this group has chosen to write a substantial critical essay about the status of Indian English as one of the recognized varieties of the Englishes that we have today. This group is composed of Mr. Mark Bermejo, Ms. Jelcy Carlos, Mr. Jhon, and lastly myself, Julie Cantillon. Moving forward, let's properly discuss the findings that we have collected about Indian English, now delving deeper into its richness and beyond. According to Masani, India claims to be the second largest English-speaking country, with 10% of its population knowing how to speak English. This number is expected to increase and quadruple in the coming decades. And now that we are in year 2023, it's not only the users that has increased, but also the studies about IE. As a quick recap, the English used by India was carried by the British Empire back then when they were colonized in 1858. And even after being free, the English in India is used in a wide range of functions like governance, education, and media, among others. In addition, Braj Kachro has classified Indian English, or IE, as part of the outer circle of his three concentric model of world Englishes, and English here is characterized as a second language. So the deviation of IE from its parent variety, British English, or BRE, can be seen in its pronunciation or sound system, or phonology, sentence construction or syntax, vocabulary or lexis, and even putting completely different meanings to some loanwords from English, which is semantics. And such even has implications on its pragmatics. And now, this critical paper analyzes different articles and studies on IE to identify its various strengths and weaknesses in the theoretical and pragmatic claims presented by the authors.
The theoretical claims of Indian English are based on the inferences and in-depth understanding of the systematic studies and analysis of various linguists and other linguistic enthusiasts, from journal articles and thesis and dissertations to even news, among other sources. This includes a detailed scrutinization of various linguistic features of the variety in terms of its strengths and weaknesses, establishing the uniqueness and richness of Indian English. Hence, we have found the following strands of Indian English in terms of its theoretical claims, whereas these strands are categorized in terms of its thematic or themes. So basically, we have assigned themes for each concept, which henceforth is applied in the subsequent parts. So among these are the following: a case of classifications, dialectal framework and subvarieties, distinctiveness of vowel sounds, intonation patterns, speech rhythm, lexical diversity, grammar deviations from British English, and in Schleider's dynamic model.
Indian English is classified into three lectal categorization: the basilect, mesolect, and acrolect. Basilectal speakers of Indian English are individuals with limited to formal education who primarily use English as a second language alongside with Hindi. Mesolectal speakers are those who use English in professional settings. Mostly, these are speakers from the middle class. Acrolectal speakers of Indian are those who adhere closely to the standard of or prestige form of the language. Kashru introduced the concept of educated variety in Indian English, where this variety is used by educated Indians comfortably in public. This is considered as more prestige and standard than other varieties of English. Furthermore, these are the regional varieties of Indian English: Butler English or Tamil English, Babu English or Bengali English, Punjabi English, Gujarati or Parsi English, Hindi English, and Boxwala English. Moving on to the distinctiveness of vowel sounds. IE has a unique vowel system influenced by indigenous languages and British English, resulting in distinct vowel sounds and minor changes that sets it apart from other English variants. Intonational patterns. Indian English exhibits diverse and distinct intonation patterns influenced by regional languages and adding a melodic quality to the language. While speech rhythm of Indian English is syllable timed, influenced by rhythmic patterns found in many Indian languages. This rhythmic flow of speech distinguishes Indian English from the stress-timed rhythm of British English.
So, lexical diversity. But first, let us acknowledge that the foundation of Indian English is deeply influenced not just by its parent variety, which is British English, but also by the multilingual nature of Indian society. In fact, Indian society has 22 official languages spoken in various states, like, for example, Hindi, Punjabi, and Sanskrit, to name a few. This means that the essence and usage of Indian English were shaped by its Indian stratum. In such a case, words from the Indian languages were incorporated into the system of Indian English. Examples of these items are nirvana and shampoo, among others. Thus, this makes Indian English lexically diverse. These lexical items are believed to be remnants of their British usage, or alternatively, they could be that their meanings have changed to suit the Indian culture and linguistic usage. Nevertheless, there are various word formation processes that are embedded within the Indian English system.
So another strength that we found in IE is its grammatical deviation from its parent variety. Some of these are the following: the arbitrary use of the articles the, a, and an. Second is the reduplication of a verb or adjective to create emphasis. Third is the usage of no and na as a tag question at the end of the sentence that is similar to the tag question, isn't it? Fourth is the use of the progressive aspect with stative verbs. Fifth is lack of subject auxiliary verb inversion in interrogative questions. Number 6 is the conversion of transitive verbs to intransitives. Number 7 is verb complementation. And 8 is the use of itself and only for emphasis. Number 9 is the topicalization. And lastly, the resorptive pronoun. So we can see in the grammatical deviations that Indian English has truly acculturated their English into their own identity.
So in terms of Shiner's dynamic model, which have 5 phases, of course, phase 1, foundation, phase 2, exonormative stabilization, third is the nativization, fourth is endonormative stabilization, and lastly, fifth one is differentiation. So each of these phases has their own implications on the status of certain English variety in the world Englishes. So Ednar Scheiner himself argued that Indian English is in phase 3, still in nativization. Meanwhile, Morkahe 2007 argued that it is in phase 4, also known as internormative stabilization. Meanwhile, there are also people who argues that it is already approaching phase 5 or differentiation. In terms of the theoretical weaknesses of Indian English, we were able to found the following themes, such as consonant pronunciation, the lexical documentation beyond time, perceptions toward the said variety, intelligibility, comprehensibility, and interpretability.
Indian English speakers may face challenges in accurately pronouncing certain consonant sounds, especially those are not present in their native languages. The influence of regional languages and code switching can lead to inconsistent consonant pronunciation.
In terms of the lexicography of Indian English, it was found that it heavily relies on the first published dictionary of the said variety, which is Hobson Jobson of Yulee Bernal in 1886, which had a second edition in 1903. Whereas the succeeding documentations heavily relied on it, and they are insufficient to justify the lexical diversity of the said variety due to deficiencies. And these deficiencies are, according to Lambert, are the lack of detailed historical perspective, incomplete coverage of lexis, also is Anglo-Indian bias, and there's a marginalization of Indian English by comparison to inner circle Englishes, and of course, assumptions to overlap between Indian and inner circle Englishes.
Just to summarize the attitudes and perceptions of Indian English speakers to IE, a lot still think that British English is the best for their country. Additionally, Katru states that Indians normally would not identify themselves as members of the Indian English speech community, opting for British English instead because they think Indian English is wrong or just a localized version of English, stereotyping it as inferior to BRE. Lastly, the English language for them still reflects an elitist idea that only upper classes can possess, which is why many think it divides them as a society.
So in linguistic discipline, aside from the given linguistic domain, in assessing the speaker's ability to be understood and or listener's ability to understand, Holland 2016 argues that the agreed term for the study of understanding can be investigated through 3 distinct language components, namely intelligibility, comprehensibility, and interpretability. In terms of intelligibility, for English foreign language student in the study of SHU 2018, IE is less intelligible. On the other hand, for native speaker, according to the study of Bansal of 1969, it was discovered that for the educated IE speaker, it is intelligible. But in this matter, it was also supported in the study of Gamera of 2018 that there is an intelligibility concern in Indian English, specifically in an outsourced telemarketing and call centers industry. So in terms of comprehensibility, Smith and Besaza of 1982 discovered that for ESL and EFL, they considered IE as less comprehensible. They seen culture-specific and culture-bound factors um, are considered in employing comprehensibility of the language, and so likewise affects interpretability.
The pragmatic claims of IE revolve around the real life usage of the variety, such as its effectiveness in conveying contextual meaning, politeness, and other pragmatic concepts. It could also be rendered as a concern of speech acts. Thus, this upholds the communicative power of IE. However, due to the lack of documentation or literature and studies to scrutinize, support, and link pragmatics fully in this endeavor, the proponents chose to focus on discourse, politeness, and speech acts aspects of Indian English. Strengths includes politeness norms in view of appeals and blessings and the case of flattery.
Indian English reflects the politeness of Indian society and its culture. So these politeness, appeals, and blessings are speech acts that convey information, establish a firm or steady emotional attitude towards an individual, and margin a particular behavioral pattern. So basically, these speech acts are persuasive and psychological in some aspects. Conveying polite appeals, there is this what we call using of pronouns. These pronouns are classified into two, T pronouns and V pronouns. Such infers that polite appeals of Indian English is truly based on its linguistic stratum. Also, there's a use of honorifics. So in Indian English, honorifics are usually paired with a positive, respectful adjective to amplify its politeness. And in terms of blessings, blessings in Indian English came from its, of course, favorite variety and have been transformed by the linguistic repertoire, by the linguistic stratum and cultural stratum of the said variety. And example of these blessings are: may you have sons, and may you always wear red, and may you live in your husband's shadow for 100 years. And same goes with with the word namaste.
So, in the case of flattery concerning politeness of Indian people, using flattering modifiers is pretty common in IE, most especially in occasions where they talk to a person of high status or because they need something from them. They use this tactic because they want to mitigate the impact of their needs and desire on the hearer or reader while also saving their faces. They tend to overuse flattery words that in theory might be inappropriate. However, in their culture, it is absolutely fine.
In terms of the pragmatic claims of Indian English, and we have found a particular witness, which is the impoliteness and sociocultural variations in its speech acts.
Indians who request transactions with strangers who are non-equal status are more likely to choose impositives than query preparatory and hints. When it's someone's with equal status, Indians are more likely to choose hints than the query preparatory. For your reference, query preparatory, these are utterance that indicates preconditions to ability, willingness, and permission on the end of the addressee and the possibility of the act of being in progress to be done. Impositives refers to the utterance that burdens the addressees to act or is morally burdened, which is subject to power, social distance, and rating of imposition as a redressive action aimed at the speech partner. Although Indian English has been widely studied, it still has scholastic lapses in its lexicology, comprehensibility, interpretability, and even regional variation. The same thing with its semantic and pragmatic inferences. Furthermore, the negative attitude and perception of the said variety speakers hinders its developments towards acceptance. Indeed, Indian English is an English variety that is governed by its distinctive language, properties, and culture. Thank you for listening.